My name is Celeste Harmon, and I'm 22 years old. 3 weeks ago, I walked across a stage at Grandview University in front of 2,500 people and delivered the commencement address. In the front row sat my parents, the same people who told me, 4 years earlier, that paying for my education would be a waste of their money. They came that day to watch my twin brother graduate. They had absolutely no idea I would be the one speaking. But this story doesn't begin at graduation. It begins in our living room on a quiet evening in late spring when my father looked me in the eye and said something I have never been able to forget. Before I go on, if this story is speaking to you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop your city in the comments and tell me what time it is where you are. I love knowing who's out there listening. Now let me take you back to the spring of 2021. The acceptance letters arrived on the same Thursday afternoon in March. My twin brother Daniel got into Prescott College, a private university that cost $62,000 a year. I got into Holbrook State University, a strong public school, $24,000 annually. Still a serious amount of money, but manageable. That evening, Dad called us into the kitchen for what he called a financial discussion. He sat at the head of the table in his usual chair, the one nobody else ever sat in. Mom stood near the counter, arms crossed loosely, expression unreadable. Daniel leaned against the refrigerator, already relaxed, already certain of what was coming. I sat across from Dad and held my acceptance letter in both hands. Daniel, Dad said, will cover your full tuition at Prescott. Room, board, everything. Daniel smiled, Mom nodded. Then Dad turned to me. Celeste, we've decided not to fund your education. The sentence didn't land right away. It felt like a sentence in a language I almost spoke. I'm sorry. Daniel is the one with the network, Dad said. He's outgoing, he makes connections, he knows how to work a room. That's where an investment pays off. He paused, the next part came out almost casually. You're capable, Celeste, but capable doesn't mean valuable. There's no real return on investing in you. I looked at Mom, she was studying the countertop. I looked at Daniel, he was looking at the floor, so I asked the only question left. What am I supposed to do? Dad shrugged. Figure it out. You're smart. You'll manage. I went to my room that night and didn't cry. I'd already used up most of my tears over the years, on holidays where Daniel's gifts were wrapped and mine were practical, on vacations where he got the hotel room with the view and I slept on a pull-out cot in the hallway, on the countless small moments that told me, without anyone saying it directly, that I was the secondary child. Instead of crying, I opened my laptop and started searching. Full scholarships for independent students. The screen glowed in the dark of my room at midnight, and I wrote everything down in a spiral notebook. Holbrook State, $24,000 per year. 4 years, $96,000. Parents' contribution, 0. My savings from working weekends at a plant nursery since age 15, $2,100. The gap was enormous, but I was good at math. I stayed up until 3 a.m. that night and made a plan. There were 3 part-time jobs I could realistically hold while carrying a full course load. Morning shift at a campus coffee cart, 5 to 8 a.m. custodial work in the administrative building on weekends. And if I could land it, a research assistant position in the economics department for extra hours per week. Combined income, roughly $1,400 a month, around $16,800 a year. Still thousands short of what I needed. The gap would have to close through merit scholarships, the kind you have to earn. I found the cheapest housing within a 15-minute walk of campus, a room in a shared house with 5 other students. $320 a month, utilities included, 1 bathroom for 6 people, no dishwasher, no dryer, a yard that was mostly weeds. I told myself it would do. My schedule for the next 4 years crystallized in that notebook. Wake at 4:45 a.m. coffee cart by 5:30, classes from 9 to 4, library or research work until 10 p.m. sleep by 11. Repeat. 4 hours of sleep, every night for years. The week before I left, Daniel posted photos of a camping trip he and his friends had taken to celebrate before college. Bonfires, kayaks, golden hour photos on the water. I was packing my second-hand suitcase with clothes from a discount bin and 2 sets of bedsheets I'd found at a garage sale. but every night before I fell asleep in those weeks, I told myself the same thing. This is what it costs. Freedom from needing them to believe in me. This is the price. I didn't know then how much I'd have to pay. And I didn't know yet that someone on the Holbrook campus would see in me exactly what my parents had refused to look for. Freshman year Thanksgiving. I sat cross-legged on my narrow bed in the shared house. Everyone else had gone home for the holiday. The house was completely silent. I called home at 6 p.m. Mom answered on the third ring. Her voice had that distracted brightness she used when she was in the middle of something more important. Celeste, hi, happy Thanksgiving. Hi, Mom, happy Thanksgiving. Is Dad around? He's in the middle of the game. She dropped her voice a register. You know how he is. Can you tell him I called? Of course, honey. Are you eating okay? I looked at the soup I'd made on the shared stove using a bag of lentils and half a box of crackers. I'm fine, Mom. Okay, well, we love you. Love you too. I hung up and opened my phone to look at something else. The first thing that came up was a photo Daniel had posted 20 minutes earlier. Mom, Dad, and Daniel at the dining room table. The good china out, candles lit, a turkey that had clearly been ordered from somewhere nice. The caption said family is everything. I counted the place settings in the photo. 3. I sat with that for a long time. The ache in my chest wasn't new, but that night it settled differently, lower, deeper, like it had finally found the place it intended to live. And then something strange happened. The ache went quiet. Not gone, but transformed. In the space it left behind was something I hadn't expected, a clean, almost cold clarity. I picked up my notebook and got back to work. Second semester, freshman year. Professor Helen Marsh taught quantitative methods for social science and had the reputation of being the most rigorous instructor on campus. 17 years of teaching, co-author of 2 widely used textbooks, known for the speed with which she returned assignments and the bluntness of her feedback. Students said she hadn't curved a grade in a decade. I sat in the second row and turned in my first major assignment expecting a B, maybe a B+ if I'd gotten lucky. The paper came back with a single letter at the top. A beneath it, in pencil, were 4 words. Come speak with me. I went to her office after class, certain I'd done something wrong. Professor Marsh was at her desk eating an apple and reading from a thick binder. She looked up when I knocked. Celeste Harmon, yes. Sit down. I sat. She set the apple down. Your analysis of variance in that data set was more sophisticated than anything I've seen from an undergraduate in 6 years. Where did you develop that kind of thinking? I didn't take any advanced coursework, I said. I just taught myself from library books in high school. There was nothing else to do. She looked at me steadily. And your home situation? I hesitated, then I said it plainly. My family doesn't support my education, financially or otherwise. I'm working 3 jobs to be here. She was quiet for a long moment, the way some people are when they're genuinely thinking and not just preparing their response. Do you know what the Caldwell Fellowship is? I shook my head. Full funding, she said. $15,000 a year in living expenses on top of tuition coverage. Awarded to 12 students nationwide. Recipients at partner universities deliver the address at their commencement ceremony. She folded her hands on the desk. Celeste, I have been teaching for nearly 2 decades, and I know what I'm looking at. Let me help you apply. The next 2.5 years moved like a current. I stopped measuring time in weekends and started measuring it in semesters, in GPA points, in scholarship applications submitted. I held my 4 through 5 straight semesters. I fainted once during a Friday morning shift at the coffee cart from exhaustion and low blood sugar, spent 45 minutes in the campus clinic, and went back to the cart on Monday. I cried once in the stairwell of the library, not because of anything specific, but because everything had been accumulating for so long that it needed somewhere to go. Junior year, Professor Marsh called me to her office. I'm submitting your name for the Caldwell Fellowship. I looked at her. You're serious? You'll write 10 essays. There are 3 interview rounds. The process will take 4 months. She looked at me over the top of her reading glasses. You've already survived harder than a scholarship application. The application took over my life. Essays on leadership, on intellectual contribution, on the relationship between personal struggle and professional vision. Phone interviews with review panels, a background check, letters of reference from 3 faculty members. Somewhere in the middle of the second interview round, Daniel texted me for the first time in months. "Mom says you never come home anymore. That kind of sad, honestly." I read the message, then I set my phone down and kept writing. The truth was I hadn't been home because I couldn't afford the bus fare, and because when I imagined sitting in that house, at that table with its 3 place settings, I didn't know what I would do with my face. That winter break I stayed on campus. My housemate Joanna left me half a box of hot chocolate mix and a paperback novel before she left. I read the whole novel in one sitting. It was the most restful 48 hours I'd had in a year. The email arrived at 7:12 a.m. on a Wednesday in October, the fall of my senior year. Subject: Caldwell Fellowship, finalist notification. Dear Ms. Harmon, out of 180 applicants, you have been selected as one of 40 finalists for the Caldwell Fellowship. The final stage will consist of an in-person interview at our headquarters in Boston, 40 finalists, 12 winners. I had a reasonable chance, statistically speaking. But I also knew that the other 39 people in that finalist pool had almost certainly not spent the previous 3 years sleeping 4 hours a night and eating whatever was on sale at the discount grocery 2 blocks from campus. My bank account held $612. A last-minute train to Boston, $89 round trip if I booked 2 weeks out. A hostel near the interview location, $45 a night. It was possible, just barely. I called Joanna. She already knew about the email because I'd texted her the second I read it, and she had replied in 12 seconds with a string of capital letters that I didn't fully understand but appreciated. "You're going," she said on the phone. "I know," I said. "Do you need money?" "I think I can cover it. But if you can't..." "I know, thank you." I booked the train that night. The interview waiting room in Boston was full of people who looked certain of themselves in a way that seemed like it had always been available to them. Pressed blazers, confident handshakes, parents who had texted them good luck from outside. I was wearing a blazer I'd bought at a consignment shop for $14. I'd polished my shoes with a paper towel and a little bit of lotion from my bag. I thought about Professor Marsh's voice on the phone the evening before I left. You don't need to walk in there and be the most polished person in the room. You just need to be the most honest one. 11 days after the interview, I was crossing campus after my morning shift when my phone buzzed. Subject: Caldwell Fellowship, decision. I stopped in the middle of the path. A man on a bicycle swerved around me and said something I didn't hear. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Harmon, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a Caldwell Fellow for the class of 2025. I read it 4 times. Then I sat down on the nearest bench and pressed both hands over my mouth and stayed that way for a long time. Not crying exactly. Something beyond crying, like my entire body needed to absorb the information slowly before it could move again. Full tuition coverage, $15,000 a year in living expenses, and the right to transfer T. That evening, Professor Marsh called. Celeste, I just received the notification. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for everything. She paused. There's something else you should know. Grandview University is a Caldwell partner school. Grandview, the school Daniel attended. If you transfer there for your final year, she continued, you'd be eligible for their honors distinction. And she let the next part land carefully. The Caldwell Fellow delivers the commencement address. I was quiet. You'd be speaking at graduation, Celeste, in front of everyone who attends. I thought about my parents. About them sitting in those seats expecting to watch Daniel walk across a stage, not knowing I existed on that campus. I want to be clear, I said. This isn't about making them feel something. I know. Grandview has the better research program for what I want to do next. That's the reason. That's a good reason, she said, and whatever else happens is simply what happens. I made the decision that night and told nobody in my family. I was 3 weeks into my final semester at Grandview when it happened. I was in the basement of the main library with my headphones in, working through a dataset for my thesis, when I heard someone say my name in a way that sounded like they were solving a puzzle out loud. Celeste. I looked up. Daniel was standing 4 feet away with a coffee in his hand and an expression that suggested he was questioning his own eyesight. How are you here? I pulled one headphone out. Hi, Daniel. You go here since when? Did Mom and Dad know? They don't know. He stared at me. What do you mean they don't know? I mean they don't know. But how are you? They're not paying for. No, I covered it. Ow. I said the word simply, scholarship. Something moved across his face in a way I had not expected. Not confusion, he'd moved past that quickly, but something that looked a great deal like shame. I gathered my notes. I need to finish this before the library closes. Celeste, he reached out and put his hand on the table, not touching me but close. Do you hate us? I looked at him, my twin brother, the one who had stood in our kitchen that night and looked at the floor. No, I said. I stopped spending energy on that a long time ago. Then I put my headphone back in and looked at my screen until he left. That night my phone showed a series of missed calls. Mom, Dad, Daniel again. I silenced everything and went to sleep. I know from Daniel, who told me later, once everything was over, that he called home immediately after leaving the library. She's here, he apparently said to Dad. Celeste is at Grandview. She's been enrolled since September. And according to Daniel, Dad said, that's impossible. She doesn't have the funding. She has a scholarship. She's not a scholarship student. Dad, I saw her. She was in the library with a thesis on her screen. Dad called me the next morning. First time his name had appeared on my phone as an incoming call in over 2 years. Francis, he started, then he caught himself. Celeste, Daniel tells me you're enrolled here. I am. Why didn't you say anything? I thought about how to answer that honestly. When have you asked? Silence. You told me I had no return on investment, I said. Did you forget that conversation? A long pause. That was 4 years ago. Yes, and I've been living inside it ever since. I'll see you at graduation, Dad. I hung up. That night I sat at my desk in the small apartment I paid for with fellowship money and thought about what he'd sounded like. Not angry, not authoritative, unsteady, like someone who had built a structure and was only now noticing the foundation. In 4 months, I would stand in front of 2,500 people. Whatever happened then would happen on its own terms. I wasn't building toward it. I was just living until I got there. The weeks before graduation had a peculiar stillness to them. I knew they were coming, Mom, Dad, Daniel, probably some combination of extended family, prepared for Daniel's big day, carrying flowers and wearing their event clothes and pointing their phones at him across the stadium. Victoria's school friends, Daniel's alumni friends, the whole warm-weather social event of it. They still didn't know the full picture. Daniel had told them I was enrolled. He hadn't told them about the Caldwell. He didn't know about the commencement address. Professor Marsh made the trip. She called from the airport the night before. How are you feeling? Like I haven't slept, which is normal. She laughed. You've done harder things than give a speech. I know. Whatever happens in that stadium, she said, it belongs to you. You built it. Joanna drove down and helped me pick out what to wear, a deep green dress, simply cut, the first new piece of clothing I had bought at full price since high school graduation. She held it up and said, you look serious. I said I feel like I might faint. She said those are compatible. The night before the ceremony, I lay awake until 2 a.m. Not anxious exactly, more like aware. I'd been moving so fast for 4 years that stillness felt foreign. Lying there, I tried to locate what I actually felt about seeing them, whether there was anything left that still hoped they would look at me and understand. What I found surprised me with its plainness. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed to say what was true in front of people who would hear it. That was enough. May 19th. Clear morning, slight wind, the kind of weather that makes everything look sharper. Grandview Stadium held 2,500. By 9:15, it was nearly full. I entered through the faculty side entrance, already in my regalia, the green sash of the honors distinction across my shoulders and the Caldwell medallion pinned at my chest, its surface catching the morning light in a way that felt almost theatrical. My seat was in the distinguished section at the front of the stage, 20 rows forward and to the left, Daniel was taking photos with friends in the general graduate area. He hadn't seen me yet, and in the fourth row of the audience, near the center aisle, I could see my parents. Dad wore a gray blazer I recognized from holiday photos. Mom had on a pale yellow dress and was holding a large bundle of white flowers. Between them was an empty seat, probably functioning as a coat holder. Not a seat kept for me. I registered that detail and let it go. Dad was fussing with his phone camera, trying to get the angle right. Mom was turned sideways, talking to the woman beside her. They looked comfortable, certain of the shape of the day. The university president stepped to the podium, and the crowd settled. Welcome to Grandview University's commencement ceremony for the class of 2025. Applause rolled through the stadium. I sat still with my hands in my lap, looking at a fixed point on the stage floor. In a few minutes they would say my name, and the morning would change direction. The ceremony moved through its early stages. Welcome, institutional remarks, acknowledgement of donors, the conferral of an honorary degree. I watched my parents in the audience, Dad nodding along to something, Mom whispering to the woman beside her. Their whole posture was relaxed, anticipatory, aimed in Daniel's direction. Then the president returned to the podium. It is now my honor to introduce this year's commencement speaker and Caldwell Fellow, a student whose record of academic achievement and personal perseverance has been extraordinary. In the audience, Mom turned to say something to Dad. He leaned toward her, camera still in hand. Please welcome Celeste Harmon. There was a suspended moment, the kind that seems to last longer from inside it than outside, and then I stood. The sound of 2,500 people adjusting their attention is something I will not forget. I walked to the podium, my heels on the stage surface, the medallion at my chest catching the light, the green sash shifting with each step. And in the fourth row, I watched my parents' faces move through several things in rapid succession. Dad's camera hand stopped mid-adjustment. Mom's bouquet tilted sideways. First, a shared glance at each other, the kind that asks, "Are you seeing this?" Then the slow convergence on recognition. Then an expression I had never seen on my father's face in 22 years. Across the stadium, Daniel had turned toward the stage. I could see the shape of my name forming on his lips. I reached the podium. I adjusted the microphone. The applause continued for a moment and then it didn't, and in that quiet I looked out at 2,500 people and at 4 rows back, my parents, motionless, watching. Good morning. My voice came back to me from the speakers, steady and clear. When I was 18 years old, someone I loved told me I had no return on investment. My mother's hand rose to her mouth. My father lowered the camera. I said it simply. I didn't perform it. I was told there was nothing in me worth putting money on, nothing in me worth backing. So I learned to back myself. And then I told them. I told 2,500 strangers about the 5 a.m. coffee cart shifts and the shared bathroom with 6 people and the lentil soup on Thanksgiving and the library stairwell where I sat one night and let it all come out at once. I told them about Professor Marsh and the Caldwell application and the train to Boston in a $14 blazer. I did not name anyone. I did not point at the fourth row. I didn't need to. The people who are supposed to love you the most can sometimes be the people who see you the least, I said. That is one of the painful facts of being human. But here is another one. Being unseen by them does not make you invisible. It only means you have to find your own light. The stadium was very quiet. In the fourth row, my mother was crying in the way people cry when they are not performing grief but have been caught by it. My father sat as still as I had ever seen him. The applause that came then rose from the floor of the stadium and built until people were standing. I stepped back from the microphone and I walked off the stage. At the reception afterward, the air smelled like coffee and flowers and sunscreen. I was speaking with the dean of the honors program when I became aware of them approaching. My parents moving through the crowd with the careful, deliberate progress of people who are uncertain of their welcome. Dad reached me first. He looked different up close than he had at the podium's remove. Smaller somehow, the gray blazer slightly rumpled now. He opened his mouth and what came out was not a prepared speech. Why didn't you tell us? I accepted a glass of water from a passing server and took a sip before answering. Did you ever ask? He closed his mouth. Mom arrived beside him, still holding the white flowers, though they drooped now, forgotten. "Celeste," she said. Her voice was the voice of someone who has been crying and then tried to stop and hasn't quite managed it. "I didn't know. We didn't know." "You knew you didn't know," I said. "You just didn't think there was anything to find out." "That's not fair," Dad started. I looked at him. I didn't raise my voice. "Fair," I said. 4 years ago you sat at your own kitchen table and told me I was not worth investing in. You spent more than $200,000 on Daniel's education and told me to manage. That happened. You don't get to call what happened next unfair." His jaw tightened. I made a mistake. "You said what you believed," I said. And then I said something I had been turning over for 4 years to see if it was still true. "You were right about one thing, actually. I wasn't worth the investment. Not to you. But I was worth every single thing I invested in myself." He flinched. James Caldwell III appeared at my shoulder and extended his hand. "Ms. Harmon, genuinely one of the finest commencement addresses I've heard. You're an extraordinary representative of this fellowship." I shook his hand and thanked him. My parents watched the founder of a national scholarship program treat their daughter like someone worth standing next to. After he moved on, I turned back to them. "I'm not pretending," I said. "I won't tell you it's fine, because it isn't. You don't get to arrive at graduation having had no part in the last 4 years and collect the feeling of pride. That's not how it works." Mom's chin was trembling. "Please, can we just start somewhere? Come home this summer. Let us. I have a job that begins in 3 weeks," I said. "In Chicago, I won't be coming home." "So that's it," Dad said. "You're done with us." "I'm not done." I kept my voice even. "I'm setting the terms. There's a difference. If you want to talk to me, really talk, honestly, without rewriting what happened, you can call me. I may or may not answer depending on the day, but the door isn't locked. It's just not open in the way it used to be, because that way didn't work for me." "What do you want from us?" His voice broke on the last word. "Tell me what it would take." I thought about it. I thought about it the way I'd learned to think about things, carefully, without hurrying to the comfortable answer. "I don't want anything from you right now," I said. "That's new. I spent a long time wanting things from you. Now I just want to go live my life. If you want to be a part of it, you'll have to learn what that means on my terms." Mom was crying again. Daniel appeared at the edge of our circle, reading the scene with the expression of someone who had arrived in the middle of a story he hadn't been following closely enough. "Congratulations," he said to me quietly. "Thank you." "I'll call you," he said. "Okay." No hug, no dramatic resolution, but no cruelty either. It was simply where we were. I turned and walked through the crowd toward Professor Marsh, who was waiting near the far edge of the tent with a quiet, contained expression that I had come to understand was her version of joy. "You did it," she said. "I did it," I said. That was all we needed. The ripples moved outward on their own schedule. By the following week, a clip from the address had made its way around certain parts of the internet. Mom's college roommate sent her a link. 2 of Dad's colleagues mentioned it at work. A woman who had been in the audience and happened to know my aunt texted the family group chat with simply, "Did you all know about this?" They hadn't. Daniel called me 8 days after graduation. He sounded like someone trying to figure out how to have a conversation he should have started 4 years earlier. "Mom's not okay," he said. "I mean, she's functional, but she's not okay." "I hear that." "Are you?" I thought about my new apartment in Chicago, about the start date on my calendar, about the list of books I'd allowed myself to buy for the first time at full price. "I'm better than I've been in a long time," I said. "That's honest." "Celeste," he paused, "I'm sorry. I should have asked you how you were doing. All those years, I should have at least asked." "You didn't create the situation," I said. "You just existed inside it without looking at it too carefully." "That's not an excuse." "No, but it's what happened. We can go from here." "Can we?" "I think so, carefully." He exhaled. "I'd like that." I moved to Chicago in June. I signed the lease on a studio apartment on the 4th floor of a building that had excellent light in the mornings and a radiator that made noises I eventually stopped hearing. I started at Ellison & Park, a strategic consulting firm, as a junior analyst. The hours were long and the work was demanding, and I went to sleep every night feeling like I had been used well. Professor Marsh called me on a Saturday in my second month. "How is Chicago treating you?" "It's loud and fast and I love it," I said. "That sounds exactly right." "I owe you a great deal," I told her. "You owe yourself a great deal," she said. I just pointed at the door. "You walked through it." Joanna visited in late August. She spent a weekend on my couch and we walked all over the city and ate from food trucks, and she looked around at everything I'd built and said, "Celeste, I know, I know." In September, a letter arrived at my apartment. My mother's handwriting on the envelope, careful, deliberate, the way she wrote when she was paying attention. Inside were 4 pages. She wrote about the morning of graduation, about watching me walk to the podium, about the specific moment she understood that the stranger at the microphone was also her daughter, and what that felt like from the inside. She wrote about the drive home, about the conversation she and Dad had that she said was the hardest conversation of their marriage. She wrote that she had looked for the right words for 3 months and kept starting over. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she wrote near the end. "I'm not asking for it. I'm just asking you to know that I see you now. I should have seen you the whole time. I'm sorry it took losing you to learn how to look." I read it twice. I folded it along its original creases and put it in the drawer beside my desk, where I kept things I wasn't done thinking about. I didn't write back yet. Not because I didn't want to. Because I needed to know what I actually wanted to say, and I wasn't there yet, and for the first time in my life, I had the space to wait until I was. If you're still with me, I want to ask you something. If you were where I was, would you forgive them? Leave yes in the comments if you would, no if you wouldn't, or maybe if you're like me and you're still working it out. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is a good time. Here is what I've come to understand about the years, between 18 and 22. I used to think love was something I had to perform well enough to earn. That if I got the grades, kept the right attitude, made myself low maintenance and uncomplaining, eventually, my parents would look at me the way they looked at Daniel, and I would know that I was real to them. 4 years working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night taught me that the equation was wrong from the beginning. You cannot earn what was always supposed to be given. You cannot work your way into being seen by someone who has decided not to see you. At some point, the only thing left to do is to decide that your own vision of yourself matters more than their blindness. I am not the person who sat at that kitchen table at 18, watching her father explain her own worthlessness back to her. She needed his approval in order to feel like a real person. I don't anymore. I built something instead, not to prove him wrong, though he was wrong. I built it because I needed to know I could, because I needed to know what I was when nobody was invested in the answer. There are nights when I still feel the weight of it. The Christmas photos where I was a footnote, the hotel room with the pull-out cot, the Thanksgiving table with 3 chairs, these things don't evaporate. They're part of what happened. But they don't sit in the driver's seat anymore. I moved them to the back. 6 months after graduation, Dad called. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. He started with the thing he'd clearly been trying to work out how to say for a while. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not a conversation where I explain myself, just an apology." "I'm listening." "What I said to you was wrong. What I believed was wrong. What I did to you across those years, not just the money but the way I saw you, the way I failed to see you, all of it was wrong. I have no defense." I sat with that for a moment. "I hear you," I said. "I don't expect you to accept it." "I know. But I wanted you to have it, whatever you decide to do with it." I took a breath. "Thank you for saying it that way." "I meant it." "I know." We talked for 20 more minutes. About small things, about Chicago, about a book he'd been reading, about nothing thaw. "Celeste," he paused, "I'm sorry. I should have asked you how you were doing. All those years, I should have at least asked." "You didn't create the situation," I said. "You just existed inside it without looking at it too carefully." "That's not an excuse." "No, but it's what happened. We can go from here." "Can we?" "I think so, carefully." He exhaled. "I'd like that." I moved to Chicago in June. I signed the lease on a studio apartment on the 4th floor of a building that had excellent light in the mornings and a radiator that made noises I eventually stopped hearing. I started at Ellison and Park, a strategic consulting firm, as a junior analyst. The hours were long and the work was demanding, and I went to sleep every night feeling like I had been used well. Professor Marsh called me on a Saturday in my second month. "How is Chicago treating you?" "It's loud and fast and I love it," I said. "That sounds exactly right." "I owe you a great deal," I told her. "You owe yourself a great deal," she said. I just pointed at the door. "You walked through it." Joanna visited in late August. She spent a weekend on my couch and we walked all over the city and ate from food trucks, and she looked around at everything I'd built and said, "Celeste, I know, I know." In September, a letter arrived at my apartment. My mother's handwriting on the envelope, careful, deliberate, the way she wrote when she was paying attention. Inside were 4 pages. She wrote about the morning of graduation, about watching me walk to the podium, about the specific moment she understood that the stranger at the microphone was also her daughter, and what that felt like from the inside. She wrote about the drive home, about the conversation she and Dad had that she said was the hardest conversation of their marriage. She wrote that she had looked for the right words for 3 months and kept starting over. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," she wrote near the end. "I'm not asking for it. I'm just asking you to know that I see you now. I should have seen you the whole time. I'm sorry it took losing you to learn how to look." I read it twice. I folded it along its original creases and put it in the drawer beside my desk, where I kept things I wasn't done thinking about. I didn't write back yet. Not because I didn't want to. Because I needed to know what I actually wanted to say, and I wasn't there yet, and for the first time in my life, I had the space to wait until I was. If you're still with me, I want to ask you something. If you were where I was, would you forgive them? Leave yes in the comments if you would, no if you wouldn't, or maybe if you're like me and you're still working it out. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is a good time. Here is what I've come to understand about the years, between 18 and 22. I used to think love was something I had to perform well enough to earn. That if I got the grades, kept the right attitude, made myself low maintenance and uncomplaining, eventually, my parents would look at me the way they looked at Daniel, and I would know that I was real to them. 4 years working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night taught me that the equation was wrong from the beginning. You cannot earn what was always supposed to be given. You cannot work your way into being seen by someone who has decided not to see you. At some point, the only thing left to do is to decide that your own vision of yourself matters more than their blindness. I am not the person who sat at that kitchen table at 18, watching her father explain her own worthlessness back to her. She needed his approval in order to feel like a real person. I don't anymore. I built something instead, not to prove him wrong, though he was wrong. I built it because I needed to know I could, because I needed to know what I was when nobody was invested in the answer. There are nights when I still feel the weight of it. The Christmas photos where I was a footnote, the hotel room with the pull-out cot, the Thanksgiving table with 3 chairs, these things don't evaporate. They're part of what happened. But they don't sit in the driver's seat anymore. I moved them to the back. 6 months after graduation, Dad called. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. He started with the thing he'd clearly been trying to work out how to say for a while. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not a conversation where I explain myself, just an apology." "I'm listening." "What I said to you was wrong. What I believed was wrong. What I did to you across those years, not just the money but the way I saw you, the way I failed to see you, all of it was wrong. I have no defense." I sat with that for a moment. "I hear you," I said. "I don't expect you to accept it." "I know. But I wanted you to have it, whatever you decide to do with it." I took a breath. "Thank you for saying it that way." "I meant it." "I know." We talked for 20 more minutes. About small things, about Chicago, about a book he'd been reading, about nothing thaw. It's been almost 2 years since graduation. I'm still in Chicago, still at Ellison and Park, and in January I'll begin my graduate program at the university here, sponsored by the firm. The girl who calculated her way through 4 years of near-impossible odds on a spiral notebook and a cracked laptop would not quite recognize the life I'm living. But I haven't forgotten her. She's the reason I'm here. Daniel and I have coffee by video call once a month. We're figuring out what siblings look like when you're starting from close to nothing. It's slow. It's sometimes awkward. He's trying in ways I can see, and I've decided that visible effort deserves acknowledgement. I'm sorry I never looked, he told me on one of our last calls. I know. I won't stop looking now. I believe you. My parents came to Chicago in the spring. 2 days, a hotel nearby, dinners I chose on my schedule. It was uncomfortable in the way that honest things often are at the beginning. Dad apologized again in person, not as a prepared speech, but as something that came out of him in the middle of dinner when he was looking at the menu and went quiet for a moment. Your mother and I have been talking a lot, he said, about what it means to love someone correctly. We don't think we did. I put my fork down. I know you didn't, I said, but you're here, that's not nothing. Mom reached across the table and I let her take my hand. She didn't say anything. Neither did I, that was enough. Last month, I made a transfer to the Holbrook State Scholarship Foundation. It was anonymous, for students who are working their way through without family support. When I told Joanna, she put her hand over her heart and didn't say anything for a while. You're doing the thing, she finally said. Someone did it for me first, I said. I thought of Professor Marsh. Of the bus seat to Boston at 11 p.m. of the email subject line that I had read 4 times before I believed it. Of the curb where I sat down and let myself come apart, completely, for the first time in 3 years, because I had finally gotten something I had worked too hard to even hope for. If any part of this story is your story too, I want to say something to you directly. The people who told you that you were not enough, they were using the wrong measure. They were measuring something that isn't what you are. You are not an investment, and you are not a risk, and you are not anyone's return on their capital. You are a person, and persons do not need to earn the right to be seen. I spent years trying to close that gap between what they thought of me and what I believed I might be. What I finally understood is that the gap was never mine to close. It was always theirs. And some people will spend their whole lives not closing it. You don't have to wait for them. You can start wherever you are, with whatever you have. Even if what you have is a cracked laptop and 4 hours of sleep, and the quiet, stubborn knowledge that you are worth more than anyone has said out loud. Start there, build from there. I did. Thank you for being here until the end. If this story found you when you needed it, leave me a comment. Tell me the part that landed. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, there are more stories coming, and I don't want you to miss them.